Some sad news to pass along. We're just learning that the fashion designer Kate Spade has died, apparently of a suicide this morning in her New York City apartment. This is according to TMZ.
It's the news that shocked the fashion world and so many of us who are her fans.
This fashion designer allegedly hanged herself with a scarf on a doorknob. The housekeeper is who found her.
Kate Spade's husband is revealing details of her mental health struggles.
Spade's husband released a statement yesterday acknowledging that his wife battled depression and anxiety for many years. Andy Spade said his wife's death is a complete shock.
On the morning of June 5th, 2018, Kate Spade, the iconic fashion designer whose focus on stylish and affordable concepts revolutionized the handbag and accessories market in the 1990s and 2000s and made her one of the most successful women in the history of American fashion, sat alone in the master bedroom of her Upper East Side apartment. The apartment was famous among the circle of wealthy and connected New Yorkers with whom Kate and her husband Andy fraternized. It was large and immaculate, and each room was appointed with classic old-world furnishings, rugs and tapestries, and hundreds of works of art covered every available wall space. Much like Kate herself, who never appeared in public without being meticulously dressed in designer labels, the apartment was gorgeous and elegant, but in a way to indicate that it all fell together naturally without too much effort. And the apartment was also Kate's place of refuge when the world outside became too much. Until a few months ago, Kate shared the apartment with Andy and their 13-year-old daughter, Frances Beatrix, who they called B for short. Kate and Andy had been a couple for 35 years and had been married for 26 of them. And together as a team, they'd built their Kate Spade fashion empire from the ground up. As their brand flourished into one of the most famous and lucrative in American fashion, the couple became A-list celebrities within the design world while amassing an estimated $200 million personal fortune. But in about 2013, Kate began to exhibit symptoms of depression and anxiety. For the next several years, she sought treatment from doctors who prescribed an array of medications for her conditions, but they did little to slow her steady descent into mental illness, which, over time, altered much of who Kate Spade once was. By every account, Kate's struggles exacted a heavy toll on her relationship with Andy and B. And in the summer of 2017, Andy moved out of their shared apartment and into a new flat a few blocks away. The couple did their best to maintain a semblance of normalcy for their daughter's sake as they worked through their difficulties. Andy later told People magazine, quote, "For the past 10 months, we've been living separately, but within a few blocks of each other. B was living with both of us, and we saw each other or spoke every day. We ate many meals together as a family and continued to vacation together as a family. Our daughter was our priority. We were not legally separated and never even discussed divorce. We were best friends trying to work through our problems in the best way we knew how. We loved each other very much and simply needed a break." But as more time passed, Kate's struggles with depression and anxiety mounted until that fateful morning of June 5th, as she sat alone at a small table in her beautifully appointed master bedroom and wrote a note to B explaining her intention to take her own life. Most of the contents of the note have not been made public, though a single line did leak to the media. It read, "This has nothing to do with you. Don't feel guilty. Ask your dad." That line has been heavily scrutinized ever since. Was she blaming Andy for her decision to end her own life, or simply suggesting B lean on her father to help her try to make some sense of it all? Whatever her intent, after Kate finished writing the note, she took an elegant red scarf out of her closet and wrapped it around her neck. She tied the other end to the handle of the bedroom door and took her own life. A short time later, a housekeeper entered the room and discovered Kate's body and called 911, but there was nothing more that could be done. Kate Spade was 55 years old. I'm Jason Beckerman.
I'm Derek Kaufman.
This is Last Days, Kate Spade.
Even those closest to Kate who knew of her mental health woes were thunderstruck by the news of her suicide. Her husband, Andy Spade, said he and B had spoken with Kate the night before she died, and they thought she was in good spirits, stating that though Kate was suffering from depression and anxiety, she was, quote, actively seeking help and working closely with her doctors to treat her disease. We were in touch with her the night before, and she sounded happy. There was no indication and no warning that she would do this. It was a complete shock, and it clearly wasn't her. There were personal demons she was battling. The actress Mindy Kaling, who grew close with Kate after they worked together, said likewise that Kate she knew was a joy to be around and was always bright and cheerful. She said she was stunned to find out that Kate was battling something much darker that many of us never saw. Like so many others who live in a grip of mental illness, Spade went to great lengths to shield the extent of her condition from almost everyone. Her sister, Retta Sappho, said Kate suffered from what she termed a, quote, debilitating mental illness, which she believed warranted inpatient hospitalization. But she said Kate refused out of fear the public would learn of her mental health struggles, which would in turn negatively impact perceptions of her and the Kate Spade brand. Sappho noted that her sister had carefully cultivated the brand to have a happy-go-lucky image, incorporating designs, patterns, and colors that were whimsical and bright. She said Kate feared that the public would have a hard time buying into that illusion if they knew that the person behind it was struggling with melancholy and darkness. Kate's frequent collaborator, the designer Fern Malice, echoed Sappho's point, saying that Kate was, quote, always the picture of perfection. Her brand epitomized happiness and elegance, and she seemed to live her life the same way. It's hard to reconcile that with the pain she must have been feeling inside.
As a quick aside, Derek, there's a lot of bad blood between Andy Spade and Retta Sappho, whereas Spade has spoken very little about Kate's death. He came out with some very lovely things he said about his wife in the wake of her death, but otherwise really hasn't talked about it except to express his profound sadness. Retta Sappho, on the other hand, has been everywhere. She initially did an interview with the Kansas City Star in which she was really the one who highlighted the fact that Kate had been suffering under the mental illness for so long. And she also said that Kate had turned to alcohol as a way of coping with her depression, something which Andy absolutely denied was the case. Some serious bad blood between the two of them. The dispute sort of went on, a real unfortunate situation in the wake of her death.
It's really difficult because Retta Sappho clearly knows a lot. And in the wake of someone's death at 55, people are grappling to understand what could drive someone who is so successful, had an empire, truly a fashion empire, to these depths. And I understand wanting to give an explanation to that,
and
saying
Andy
she was struggling.
Andy wasn't giving it. And he had every right not to, but he didn't want to talk a lot about what she had gone through. But Retta sort of filled that void, but there was a lot of accusations. Maybe she was clout chasing a little bit, trying to get her own 15 minutes at that point.
I wonder, Andy, they had a 35-year relationship together. I mean, they were truly, he must have been absolutely devastated by this. They've got a young daughter.
A 13-year-old
daughter at the time. And I wonder whether he thought that his reticence was showing respect for her decision, Kate's, not to share this publicly while she was going through it. I mean, Kate, as you noted at the top, was very mindful about harming her brand, harming her professional endeavors by creating a public perception that she was sad. The brand was very fizzy and light. And so maybe he thought that was respectful, but it's a very tough situation because I understand both sides of it. I really do.
Retta, to the extent that she's saying things she knew, and there was some accusations, maybe she was sort of filling in blanks she didn't really know. She's the sister. She also has every right, if it makes her feel better, if she thinks it's maybe what Kate would have wanted or whatever it is, she has that right to talk too. But it doesn't mean that Andy has to like it, and you can see where that friction would lie.
Absolutely. But what's not in dispute is that Kate was, by her own admission, a worrier and a perfectionist who exercised nearly obsessive control over even the most minute aspects of everything in her life, from the stitching on the handbag she designed to the meticulous way she dressed and decorated her apartment. But as her mental illness compromised that control, it undermined much of who Kate was and caused her mental state to vacillate wildly from one moment to the next. According to Kate's best friend of nearly 40 years, Elise Ahrens, Kate would be in excellent spirits for long stretches of time before suddenly cratering into a deep, deep depression. Here's Ahrens talking to Good Morning America about her belief that Kate's suicide was not the result of a long stretch of compiled depression, but a decision made while she was in the throes of a momentary period of overwhelming darkness.
She'd be sad, and then one minute later, she'd make a joke. So it was, we talked every day. And most of the time she was very happy. But I don't know if anyone can understand the depths of depression of another person. And thought about it. But I think it was probably one moment of despair, of deep sadness that she felt while she was alone. And I can't answer what that was.
But through it all, the meteoric rise to wealth and fame, followed by the heartbreaking descent into mental illness, Kate was always extremely well liked by everyone in her orbit, and she had a reputation for generosity. Andy described her as, quote, the kindest person I've ever known. And Kate's brother-in-law, the actor and comedian David Spade, he's Andy's brother, said in addition to all of her other positive attributes, Kate was quick on her feet and could make him laugh out loud, which is pretty high praise from someone like David Spade. But most of all, he talked about how kind she was. Here's David with Robin Roberts talking about how much he admired his sister-in-law, and he gave a little anecdote showing just how good-natured she could be.
It is very sweet that everyone came out of the woodwork that she really made an impact. I remember when we used to hang out, and it's funny because every girl I was with or anyone around, anyone that knew they would see Katie would dress differently. They would bring their A game. It was very sweet they would be like, is Katie coming? Are Andy and Katie going to be there? And if they were, it was a whole new wardrobe. And Katie was very sweet. She knew that they were doing that, and she would mention something about, say some compliment, and when I say, you don't dress up for me, they go, yeah, that's her and you're you. I go, it sounds like a cut down. But she was such a beautiful, lovely, great spirit that obviously will be missed. I'll start bawling, but thank you for saying something.
Derek, we've discussed on this podcast mental illness, people with mental illness many, many times. And it's always dangerous for the two of us to try and get in the head of someone who suffers from mental illness.
These are very complicated things.
They are. And you and I bring a very limited amount of expertise to the discussion. We just read a lot, and we see these sort of fact patterns develop a lot, and we draw inferences from that. But I think, here, based on what we've been discussing and the quotes from her loved ones, we have a pretty good picture of who Kate Spade was and what she was going through. I especially am taken by the fact she was such a perfectionist, so hardworking, totally in control. And when the mental illness started to undermine that control, I think that really exacerbated her condition.
Yeah, you could see that reflected in her work. Kate Spade bags, which my wife was a big fan of, my girlfriends were fans of. I mean, these were omnipresent. They're not chaotic designs. There are some artists who it looks like they're splatter painting. It's sort of a Jackson Pollock approach. Kate Spade bags were meticulous. They were usually one solid color or a very beautiful design. The clasps were just perfect. And that comes from someone at the top who insisted on perfection in the stitching. I mean, she was making something that was elegant, but accessible. You could buy these things, and we'll talk about that more as we get into her legacy. But you could see that reflected in the work. What I'm struck by most about Kate Spade is she seemed like the kindness is what comes up from David Spade and from Andy quite a bit, who knew her best, frankly. This was a woman who was married to David's brother for 20 plus years and knew her for 35 plus years. So they knew her intimately, and she seemed like a very kind and sensitive person. And sometimes when mental illness creeps into someone who is so sensitive to the world around them, it can spiral in
and I thought the point
ways.
that Elise Aarons made about this is not somebody who was, we've been around those people who are constantly manic. They're constantly in the throes of some sort of mental situation or another. She would go for long stretches where she'd be great. And then all of a sudden just something would happen, something would trigger, and she would really have a moment. And
it makes sense. You can't be that successful if you're constantly in the throes of depression. So she had to have episodes of real sort of lucidity and happiness to build something like this.
And so she has, it definitely created a friction in their relationship. We talked about that. Andy moved out 10 months before she died. She was heavily medicated. We don't know what kind of impact that had, but all medication, psychological medication especially, it has an impact on your personality. And there's some evidence of that here.
And Andy even doesn't deny that she was taking medication to deal with these. He denies the alcohol.
Exactly. So, and there is that dispute with Retta about the alcohol use. And then there's that crazy suicide note where she says, it's not your fault to her daughter, which is the right thing to say. I mean, to the extent you're going to do this, the right thing to say.
It's the next line.
Says, ask your father, ask your dad. And it's hard to know exactly what to take away, but you read that. It's pretty brutal.
It's absolutely devastating. You're right. There are roughly two major interpretations of this. One is she wrote it and said, it's not your fault, daughter. It's your father's. Like the other line meaning, ask your father, meaning he knows it's his fault. That's devastating. I mean, they were in a relationship for decades. So that had to hit him especially hard.
It hurts me.
It hurts me to even hear that. We have wives that we've been in relationships with for decades. Imagining seeing that note. But I want to be a little bit maybe more charitable that she was just telling the daughter, hey, this is going to be devastating. I'm letting you know that it's not your fault, and your father will help guide you through what happened.
Right. That's the charitable.
I hope so.
That's the charitable explanation. And why don't we go ahead and just believe that?
I think so. It's the only thing for me to sort of like wrap my head around. Whatever it was that plagued Kate and Andy's relationship toward the end, there's no disputing how important they each were to their combined success. Kate Brosnahan met Andy Spade while they were both students at Arizona State University, and it was a match made in heaven. Andy was relentless and ambitious, and Kate was a bona fide genius. A mutual college friend said from the moment they met, they were inseparable. They had a dynamic synergy that was evident to everyone around them. Both had previously worked in the fashion industry, and together they recognized that there was a void in the market for handbags between, as Andy put it, the high-end European bags with their fancy adornments and sky-high prices, and the clumsier mass-market bags from American retailers like LL Bean and The Gap. So Andy cleaned out his 401k and worked nights as a copy editor to pay the bills, while Kate set out to design something that was both elegant and functional, and which could be manufactured and sold for a reasonable price. The legend goes that in 1993, Kate made her first prototype purse out of Scotch tape and construction paper. It was a simple square design without any adornment other than a little black label featuring her first name and Andy's last name. They weren't married yet, to form Kate Spade, a nod to the combined effort it would take to get the company off the ground. Andy knew Kate's design could be a sensation, and he began learning everything he could about the accessories market so he could eventually promote and sell Kate's creations. And in the meantime, Kate developed 6 original prototype silhouettes, each constructed from brightly colored linen with a simple flower trim. At the center of the inaugural collection was the nylon-constructed Sam bag with its offbeat, boxy construction that was like nothing else on the market. At first, there were very few orders, and questions were raised about the viability of the enterprise. Kate herself later said that for 3 years the company lost money, and neither she nor Andy took a salary. She said, "Andy was funding everything. I just remember thinking, I think we need to shut this down." But in 1996, everything changed when Kate Spade bags started appearing in paparazzi photos on the arms of Winona Ryder, Meg Ryan, Gwyneth Paltrow, and then even Julia Roberts, at the time the unquestioned biggest young movie star in the world.
And in the blink of an eye, Kate Spade was literally everywhere, and the company was making gobs of money. Kate was suddenly the hottest young designer in the country. She won a litany of design awards for her elegant and functional handbags, which were priced in the $150 to $450 range, which marked a seismic shift in the market because they offered upscale quality and style while being affordable, 2 attributes that are more common in today's world of democratized fashion, but at the time were largely seen as mutually exclusive. Vogue called her design concepts and production methods revolutionary, simple, yet so full of personality. So this is long before the days that the internet has pushed clothing price, textile prices so far down. Yeah. And now there's a real sort of a love for rough and ready fashion. Fast fashion.
Where
right.
they copycat the hot thing on TikTok, and then you'll see it immediately spring up all these other designs that look like it.
Right. So back in the early 90s, there were roughly 2 buckets. There were quality designs and quality materials that cost a lot, and there were lesser quality stuff that you could be had for cheap. And Kate and Andy saw that, especially in the handbag market, there was nothing in between. So they figured it out. Kate started using nylon as the exterior of the bags instead of leather, or
big cost savings.
Big cost savings, but also not the cheap pleathery stuff that would indicate inexpensive that people didn't really want to have. And then Andy knew how to leverage mass production to keep prices down. The result was luxury products at a much cheaper cost. And again, common today, but really novel at the time.
Absolutely revolutionary. And I remember when you say the nylon on the back of the bag, everyone thinks that leather is the only way to show quality. But it wasn't like these bags shied away from using nylon. They used it in a fashionable sense. Yeah. So a lot of cheap bags you can get at Ross in the discount bin, they're try to look like leather, as you said. They sort of have the dimpling and things like that, pleather. But they said, no, we shouldn't do that. We shouldn't be chasing leather. Right. We should make something different and make it high fashion. And that small label, I'll never forget.
That Kate Spade label, that black Kate Spade label.
It was a status symbol.
Every bag. It was a status symbol.
It was like the CC of Chanel.
Exactly right. And everyone noticed. Designer and close friend Fern Malice said that by the late 1990s, quote, everybody had Kate Spade bags because everyone could afford them. People would even happily buy more than one. And she noted that for many young women, Kate Spade didn't mean a handbag or even a New York designer. Rather, it represented something bigger, a milestone purchase, an achievement, a first investment in one's self.
The business remained nimble, and Kate and Andy expanded into shoes, clothing, accessories, and home goods, and the two seemed to work together in harmony. Fern Mills said about them, quote, they were true partners in every sense of the word. Andy supported Kate's creative impulses, while Kate trusted Andy's instincts on the business side. It was this mutual respect and understanding that made their relationship so special and their brand so successful. Here's Kate talking about her and Andy's symbiotic working relationship.
Are you obsessed with details?
Absolutely. And I think that's why we're a great team, because...
I'm not. You're not?
No, he is so great at vision and coming up with great ideas that move things, and you think, God, I wish I'd thought of that. But I'm really good at, doing this and kind of, executing. And so and I get nervous about kind of looking that far ahead. And Andy gets bored, looking down at his feet.
And as their success mounted, Kate and Andy reinvested in the enterprise, opening stores in New York, Boston, Los Angeles, and Tokyo. And the Kate Spade label became among the most famous American fashion brands around the world. In 1999, they sold a portion of the company to Neiman Marcus for a reported $33 million. And then in 2006, they sold the rest to Liz Claiborne, getting out at the height of the brand's popularity and with enough money so they'd never have to think about working again. But that is not, of course, how Kate and Andy were wired. Kate first turned her focus to philanthropy and on raising her daughter, while Andy started his own creative agency and founded the sleepwear brand Sleepy Jones. And then in 2016, Kate leapt back into the accessories business with a new brand called Frances Valentine. Interestingly, to mark this new chapter, Kate legally changed her name from Kate Spade to Kate Valentine. She said it was a business decision, but it had also been suggested that it was a possible move away from the business and personal ties to Andy. Regardless, the brand was an immediate success, a second act that solidified Kate's status among the most important American designers of all time.
After her death, so many stories emerged of Kate's impact, not only on fashion, but on her business partners and her employees, as well as her friends and her family. Among them was Kate's niece, the actress Rachel Brosnahan from The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel and House of Cards, who grew up idolizing her Aunt Katie and lived with her in New York when she was a young actress trying to make it. She paid tribute to her aunt upon her death, saying, quote, "She was the kindest and most generous person I've ever had the privilege of knowing. We were so touched in the wake of this unthinkable tragedy to learn how many other people had been touched by her personally, either by her work or her designs. When I was making my Broadway debut, she let me crash in their extra bedroom. She included me in family dinners every night while we were in rehearsals and would keep extra food for me in the fridge for when I came home. She told me she sobbed through the bows on opening night because she was so proud. But I'm not alone in that experience. That was the magic of Katie. She loved so hard she was often moved to tears, and laughter that moved through her entire body and joy that radiated out of her pores. She spread stardust over everyone she came into contact with. I was lucky to be in her orbit."